Hey guys, this is Mark Smith, and I will be presenting the first part of Mark, Francisco, and Izzy's GoVenture project. And as you can see on my screen right here, all three of us chose to do the gym business for our little business experiment. And I will be business number one as Primal Fitness, so I will be the guinea pig. So my strategy during this specific final run was to kind of play it conservative during the first 30 days in terms of trying to build up cash and the stuff I need for maximizing revenue. And after the first 30 days, I really went all in into investing into employee numbers, their individual trainings, and their benefits. And I pretty much throughout the entire 60 days, I heavily invested the mass amount every single day into marketing and advertising in order to generate revenue. However, because of this, the primary keyword in my 60-day run was operating expenses. So I had major expenses by the end of it that really dipped into my net income. My training expenses were way higher than Francisco and Izzy's at $68,000 right there, and my benefits total $23K, and my marketing was also pretty high at $35K. So my employees were really happy, but my gym didn't perform as well as Izzy and Francisco's, as I'll dive into later. So for my horizontal analysis, I have my income statement right here. And as you can see, this scary number circled in red, it was my mountain high operating expenses that really delved into my somewhat small net income that was pretty low on the market compared to Francisco and Izzy. And that was mainly because of these reasons above. So for my vertical analysis, as you can see right here, my expenses were over 50%, which is, again, I emphasize, very astronomically high compared to Francisco and Izzy. And because of that, my revenue was about more or less a little bit less than Francisco and Izzy's, but my expenses really ate up into this net income as a result. And also because of all these trainings and benefits and other overhead expenses that I really wasn't getting a good return on return on investment, my ratios kind of suffered as a result as well, mainly due to low cash. My low current ratio and my high debt to asset ratio was not that impressive for potential shareholders and not that impressive for loans, because even though I had very high PPE, like my property, my services, and everything else, I didn't really have many current assets, mainly cash, as a result of me constantly having to pay off bills and payables, mainly through trainings and salary, wages, and everything else that resulted from this astronomically high operating expenses. So because of those reasons, I kind of gave myself a C+ for my financial performance, mainly due to these scary highlighted numbers, which I said they're overhead because of how little return on investment I got into them. Mainly the biggest culprit right here, it's the $60K in training that really I didn't really see that much of a surge in customers and market performance as a result. And now I will let Francisco take the reins from here.
Okay, I'll go over the results from the simulation of the fittest gym. The first part started the business small and lean and upscaled progressively, and only when actual cash flow was enough to pay the upgrade when due. The second component was a low cost to serve strategy to maximize the profit. The expenses were kept low as a baseline for discretionary spending like hiring, benefits, and marketing. and they were increased only temporarily and only when pursuing specific objectives, and then reduced back to the baseline when that objective was met. The other component was the price strategy, which was routinely increased to maximize the price and maximize revenue. So it was continuously testing price increases and looking for customers' feedback. And the last one was inventory control, which was critical to keep enough goods for sale and minimizing the cost of transportation. Going to the horizontal analysis, comparing versus Primal Fitness, the first highlight is a significantly higher net income of 273% higher than Primal Fitness. If we consider that the net revenue was very similar to Primal Fitness, then we conclude that the higher net income was explained by a significantly lower cost, including the cost of goods sold and especially the operating expenses. The vertical analysis as a percentage of net revenue, first we have conclude that we have a very healthy gross profit of 66%. And again, the low cost to serve strategy, which is reflected in very low operating costs of 18%. That results in a very profitable business with 55% of net income as percentage of the net revenue. The ratio analysis shows a very low liability over assets of 1%, and resulting also in the equity over assets of 98.9%. So very, very high stockholders' equity. The current ratio is also very high, 55.1, which is explained by extremely high cash balance at the end of the simulation. The debt to asset ratio is very low, 0.001, which is explained by very almost no debt or liability, by most of the accounts payable being paid before day 60, and we did not incur any additional liabilities during the few days of operation. The overall evaluation of the business, I'll start with the strategy, saying this strategy was successful, especially looking at the results of very high net income. The business was sustainable, kept enough liquidity throughout the whole simulation period, and acceptable levels of satisfaction in customers and employees with acceptable turnover rates, and with a steady and healthy revenues. As far as improvement opportunities, there's one potential to have used the available cash balance at the end to upgrade the equipment and potentially generate more revenue by higher memberships. Now, it's unclear whether that would have resulted in higher net income or not, but it's something that could have been tried. As far as the financial position at the end of the simulation, it was a very strong financial position, very well positioned to expand the business. Very high return earning, possibly too much cash on hand, and almost no liabilities, which in real life, it means in a business situation, I would have probably used the cash to either expand the business, and if no opportunity for expansion, probably would have resulted in distributing the dividends, or at least invest that cash in long-term investment.
All right. I'm Izzy, and this is my business, Swole Patrol. So let's go right into it. Strategy, the things that made a difference for me was learning how much inventory to order, when to order it, which I decided to order every Friday as fast as possible so that it would arrive on Sunday night. Boom. I was never out of inventory, and inventory never expired. I had to learn to buy the cheapest equipment all around. I was trying to buy nice equipment to begin with. Not necessary. You can gradually upgrade. And from the start, before I even opened, all in on marketing, and I never dropped on the marketing. And I also made sure that I had plenty of staff on hand. I started with 6, and when I started getting complaints about customer service, bumped up to 9 employees. I also was very greedy with my membership price. I was bumping the membership price up, and up. And once I reached the capacity at 2,000 members, then I dropped the commission to 10%, but I still kept the membership price high. So moving along, if I can. Oh, yes. Horizontal analysis. So the main thing that stood out to me here was I had pretty moderate operating expenses, and comparing to Primal Fitness, it was a good bit lower, and I also had more revenue coming in. We had about the same net revenue, but the difference in operating expenses is where I gained my profit there. So vertical analysis, I kept my operating expenses pretty low and the cost of goods relatively low, higher net income, higher gross profit. Amazing. Ratio analysis. So I paid all of my bills ahead of time for like the last 2 or 3 weeks of the simulation, not knowing that I would need some liabilities to calculate with, because when you have 0 liabilities and you're in a ratio, then it becomes undefined. So I had to let my simulation run to 61 days, so I had some liabilities to calculate with. At the end of the day, I had very high equity, very low liability, giant current ratio, and my debt to asset ratio reflected the same thing. Almost no debt, very high assets. Overall evaluation. So is this a sustainable strategy? Yes. I was raking it in. I had my bills paid on time, high cash balance. Great. What would I do to improve? So I think I was on the right path, but if I could run the simulation longer, I would like to gradually invest in equipment. All of that equity that I had would be redistributed, reinvested into my business and into my employees. And at the end of the simulation, what was your overall financial position? I was doing great. I had $271,000 in equity and no liabilities. So I think I did pretty good. We'll see what kind of business ventures I get into